So my story really begins at birth. And at birth, I was aware of many, many things that I didn't know were not ordinary. As an example, when I was 5, I remember seeing moving geometric objects of multicolor that I could, by putting my hand out, move them around into different patterns. And that's very entertaining for a 5-year-old. I stayed quiet and didn't get into trouble with mom because I was busy doing patterns. So my experiences just kept rolling as I got older. They became a little more sophisticated. I started seeing ghost-like things in my room. And it's astonishing what a 10-year-old feels when something's in his room that shouldn't be in his room other than mom and dad and my brother, who was always making trouble for me. So then time advanced itself, and eventually I headed to the point where I wanted to learn what I was experiencing because there was no base of knowledge available to me at home. These kinds of things were not talked about. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and talking about strange experiences was not a good idea. So instead, I just played baseball and hockey and did all the things an ordinary kid would do, thinking that, yes, this was all going to go away. There was no evidence and it was going to stay, but then it didn't go away. And it just continued. And it was an expansion of sensitivity that I had started out in that crib, moving patterns. So this continued for a while. And then I decided, as I mentioned, to find out what the heck this is. So I went back, and this might date me a little bit, but Rudolf Steiner, Blavatsky, the Dawn, Temple of Dawn, and all those esoteric writings, Dion Fortune. And it was all an opportunity to learn more. And then I got into the stories from the 1920s, 1930s about individuals who did amazing things. W.F. Myers, we talked about it. So the knowledge base just kept increasing. And then I joined a group called ARE, the Edgar Cayce group. And in that group, I found out more, which is that the things that I was experiencing were not abnormal. They were just normal in a different frame of reference. And that was my perception of what reality is. And then I continued to read and came to the point where I wanted to know more. So when I was about 18, I went to a past life hypnotist and experienced regression. And I guess I was the perfect candidate because as soon as I laid down on that couch, counted backwards from 100, by the time I got to 93, I was gone. And I went to another life. And I'll put a little story at the end on that life. In that life, and this is my first experience, was as a Viking. And I didn't have good manners. I tended to do things that now I regret. But to tell the story, keep it moving along, I was on a ship. My brother, who is my current brother, was the captain of the ship. And I was up on the mast because that's where young guys went, go look out for ships. Plus, he wanted me to stay out of trouble. So I was up on the mast and I was enjoying it because everyone was slaughtering each other. And it's kind of like the Viking thing to really enjoy that stuff. And I felt a thump on my chest and I looked over and there's a spear. Someone had thrown the spear from the deck right into my chest. And needless to say, I was gone. Now the story might have ended there, but I was very curious because I had a very unusual knot of skin in my chest where the spear went in. So I went to the hospital. I talked to whoever does male mammograms, if there's such a thing. I think it was like x-rays in those days. And they were very concerned. They thought I had a very active tumor. So they took a biopsy and it turned out that what I had was a birthmark. There was no downside to that, there was not a tumor, or maybe it was a tumor that wasn't active, or kind of started out and then tired itself out and stopped growing. So that was an alert to me that the things that I was experiencing were probably not total fabrication, but they were very imaginative, because imagination is the keystone to experiencing higher realms of consciousness. If you can't imagine it, if you can't think about it, it just doesn't happen. So as I mentioned, I was in the ARE group, and we talked about the things that Edgar Cayce was doing, and I was fascinated by his ability to heal going into a trance state. So I said, wow, maybe I can do that too. So I started going into the meditative state, and sure enough, I could lift from my body and see what was going on. I could see, for me, it was simple. There was blue energy, which is great. And then there was red energy, which was not good. So I started by examining myself, looking down from head to toe and examining the energy to see what my body was doing. How was I doing? And then that became interesting. But after that story of expanded reality, I went to college to learn how to be an artist. I went to the Art Institute of Chicago, which I found out later was a fairly prestigious place, but they paid for it, so that was good. I didn't have any money. Then I went to graduate school, University of Wisconsin, and with a master's in sculpture. And then I came back and I decided, oh, I'm going to go travel. I've always wanted to travel. So I went to Greece and Turkey and up to the borderline of Iraq and Syria. And I would stop someplace and I would know where I was. As an example, when I was in Crete, I was taking the road to the prince's palace. The prince, I guess he had a palace, being the son of the king and everything. And the guy who was leading us said, it's down there. And I thought about that. And then instantly the moment transformed. I was a kid in a cart that was driven by an older gentleman, probably a father or a farmer. And I knew that the palace was up there. So I insisted on going. I said, you go down your road and I'll catch up with you when I get there. So I went up this trail, the switchback trail to the top, and there was the palace. And in the palace, I found a piece of marble that was in the bathing room for the princess. And I thought that was cool. And I was kind of stupid. I picked it up and put it in my pocket. It was a small piece, so I don't feel terrible about it, but shouldn't do those things. So I took that piece of rock and I continued my travels down to where Ephesus was and down on the Black Sea. And every place that I went that I felt attracted to, I could feel some component of energy of a previous life come into me. And I felt a sense of completion. And I was never attracted to going there again. Once I completed the experience of the past life, which I became to believe was a past life, the desire, the energy to do it again, it left. So then I went back to my home in Chicago. I was living at my mother's house, and I was introduced to a psychic, which I thought was really cool because I didn't know any psychics at that point in my life. And she was trying to get me to let her teach me how to use these base skills and do something with them. So I agreed to that. She said, do you have that stone you found? I said, yeah, here it is. And she put her hand on it. And then an amazing thing happened. Being in Chicago, you have two doors. You have the inside door and you have the outside door because it gets pretty cold and it snows and things like that. And the outside door flipped open. Now, this is one of those early sprocket sets where it's supposed to close as soon as it opens, but it opened and stayed open. And then the inside door opened and a breeze came in, a very shadowy breeze came in, and everyone in the room, including my mother and my brother and my sister who was sitting there, and plus the psychic lady, our eyes popped out, because this was not ordinary reality. This was something unique, something special. And the psyche looked over me after touching the stone. She said, "You have a visitor." And I said, "Who's that?" She said, "Someone that was an essential part of your life when you lived in Crete." And the room filled up with a lilac smell. It was a beautiful smell. I said, "What does she want?" I said, "She wants forgiveness for starting the fire that you died in when you were in the palace." I said, "Okay." Yeah. It was pretty easy at that point. I wasn't burdened with a lot of other things. And then it was kind of like a relief. And then the inside door closed, and then the outside door. But what remained was the lilac smell. And it stayed in that house, and it followed me around for a week until finally I was changing my clothes, and I was getting a little embarrassed because I figured this lady was standing over my shoulder because the lilac smell was there. And I said, "Please, I forgive you. We're all good. Go back to where you came from." And the smell stopped, and never had that experience again. So that's an illustration of the things that I've gone through in my life where I visualize this. The guy's a little bit old, but what I visualize is entering a location, a place, and transitioning into a different realm of consciousness. In the 1970s, the entire system had not been formalized. There was no place to go. There's no directions. You just went and hope for the best. Excuse me, I don't know how these things work. Oh, good. So by entering into that realm of consciousness, that realm of higher reality, I wrote in the book, we actualize new awareness by awakening to the reality of underlying energy structures. And underlying energy structures are the energy configurations that make our reality. And I would see these guys. I was a very devout Christian. I would go to church, and I would see these guys floating around in the back of where the musical instruments were. There would be multitudes of these things. And then I saw they were talking to each other. They're having a great time, because people don't understand what's being said. They can't even hear them, but I was hearing them, and they were all laughing and have a good time. But that is my artist's interpretation of what I saw as an angel. At that point, I was calling them angels. They're really just energetic beings of a higher frequency than we exist at. So this continued for a while. Maybe it went too early. Where I was in my early 30s, and I just didn't want to live anymore. I felt that I had fulfilled my obligation to the earth plane. And even though I was married and had a kid, I was rather irresponsible. I decided to kill myself. And not to be too dramatic, but it was a knife in the stomach, because in another time I had actually done that. So I was comfortable with it. I thought it was better than flopping around with chemicals and things like that. So I was laying in the bed in a ceremonial position with the knife at my side and a towel in front of me because I don't want to make a mess. And I picked it up and I was ready to go, and I was yanked out of my body. Which in hindsight, I was very thankful I was yanked out of my body, but yanked out of my body. And then I went to a place. Still too soon, we'll get to that. Sorry, I'm doing this last minute. I went to a place that was a portal of light. And I went right up to the light, and then a brilliant white figure stepped in front of me. And the love that emanated from that figure changed my life. This whole thing about suicide, out of my head, never came back again. I had things to do, but that's all happening in fractions of seconds, because that space is timeless. There is no time in the higher levels of awareness. There is only now. It's a constant state of now. And then the figure step, I kind of looked over and saw a city and a park and all kinds of strange, wonderful things, colors that I had never seen before. And as an artist, I had looked at a lot of colors. And then the figure stepped in front of me and put a hand out, kind of like a traffic cop. Stop and pushed me in the chest. And I snapped back to my body. And I was in shock to see what I had almost done. And I packed away the tools, got rid of them, gave them to somebody. Wasn't going to do that one again. But what lasted and what stayed with me was the experience of the portal. It was at that time, there was no tunnel. There was no fanfare. There was no spinning things happening. You just went right to the portal. And there you entered, or in my case, there I was kicked out or rejected, not knowing what was coming up. So it was an upsetting experience because it was so vivid. Everything in that experience, in that image, was vivid. It was like stop frame. So with the self-realization that depression is not a part of my life and suicidal thoughts are not a part of my life, what do I do with my life? So then I continued to go through a process of self-awareness, became educated, different groups, and got to the point where I became a very good healer. And I think I was in my late 30s. And this continued, and it continued and continued. And then finally, I just got diverted. I got married. I started a family. I had a nice business. But then many years later, and I continued to experience these things. They didn't go away. They never go away. Once you are there, they never go away. I decided that I should follow up on this thing. The beauty of having a near-death experience is that when you touch the light, you never forget the light. Never. Once you are immersed, even peripherally into the light, it stays with you for the rest of your life. So the interesting thing about the portal was the energy, which became a part of me, which gave me access to the portal forever. So now I could go there on my own, which I did, because I was fascinated by that place. So I would travel out of my body and I would go to the portal and I'd stick my head in, and they weren't kicking me out because I think I was legal at that point. And this continued for a while, for a long time. And the sense of unfulfillment, the sense of frustration disappeared. And my healing improved. I could actually give psychic readings, which is nothing more than reading energy. And I was pretty good, satisfied. But then I was sitting in my chair, my favorite gray meditation chair. It's one of the lazy boys where the feet go up and you can sit back. It's kind of like driving a race car. And I was sitting in my chair and I got pulled out of my body again, just like the first time many, many years ago. And I went into what I call the pattern. And the pattern was the galaxy framed by lines of energy. And within the energy, you see there are different features of light were consciousness. And consciousness that was active and participating in our lives. And essentially, I was experiencing what's called the tree of life, the tree of knowledge. And in the pattern was available to me pretty much anything I wanted to know, which for me was very difficult to articulate because of the vastness of the experience. And the closer I came into the pattern, the more emotional it became. At the point that I was in tears, and I'm not really a tear guy, but I had tears running down my face because I was experiencing a fundamental reality of the universe that I lived in. And then the closer I got, the more knowledge I gained, which is from, this is an example, a graphic of knowledge. I understood that the pattern was put in place by the creator of all that is. Some people would say God. I say the creator because I'm kind of like walking the line. I'm not quite certain who exactly created this thing. But the closer I got, the more illuminated my consciousness became. It was a universal experience. It was an experience that encompassed all things. And then I came back into my chair and I couldn't talk about this for 6 months. Every time I would talk about this, the faucet would start again. It was too emotional. The experience of energy at the level of the higher frequencies of spirit was just overwhelming. Then finally, members of my family, when I was writing a book, and my editor who said, Kevin, you know, that's a great book, but it puts me to sleep. I said, well, kind of like happy peacefulness, loving thoughts are they're relaxing. Just spice it up a bit. You have all these experiences, put the experiences in the book. And so I was forced to write down the experience of the pattern. And this was the result. The result was knowledge. The result was an integration of myself into spirit in the form of an encapsulated globe that was, I don't even know what size that is in that reality, but an encapsulated globe that contained knowledge, it contained experience, it contained the essences of who I am and who everybody is. And then the pattern made sense. Because human beings have an incredible inclination to destroy themselves, and they just don't stop. And the agents of destruction are getting more sophisticated and more powerful. We sit on our chair and think, what is going to happen next? Ukraine shows up and you got Russia bombing Ukraine, trying to flatten it down to rubble so they could come in and make it their house. Violence doesn't stop. It has never stopped. I saw the pattern as being a tool of education on how to stop the violence, because the pattern is not about violence. It's about growth. It's about lifting consciousness so that we can be together and talk together, that we can continue a dialogue of peaceful intent, regardless of boundaries, territorial boundaries. We can continue the dialogue because the dialogue is essential to who we are and what we become. Now, I have some thoughts about us, people destroying each other. And that's who I became. A man walking up to an altar with the light shining down. To me, that is the gift of spirit, consciousness. High frequency, the violence of death is the door opener to who we are. And this is my imagery based upon my experience of the transformed man. So you ask yourself, where are we going? What is this? What's the end result? That's the end result. Conscious man. And that includes conscious animals and rocks. Maybe I'll understand them next time around. Consciousness. Consciousness is the key to the growth of the human spirit. So this is where I reside in my heart and in my soul, not particularly my brain, because I still got problems dealing with this one, but here, it's here. So I would suggest that near-death experience is a finger pointing at you saying it's time for change. Because you have changed. And the change was you died and you came back forever, 2 seconds, 3 minutes, a lifetime. I don't know, whatever it is for you. You came back and you came back with purpose. You didn't come back as a blank stone. You came back knowing that there were things you needed to do in your life to fully express spirit. To see the NDE experience is kind of brutal and harsh, but sometimes needed to break you out of patterns. And the patterns being what you were taught and what you learned since you were a baby. So the summary is, from me, we made it. We just don't see it. And that's okay. The pattern is there to help guide us to the point where we just sit back and say, we made it. And many people with forward knowledge of life cycles and expressions of life and consciousness, they affirm it. We made it. So as you sit here today, just take a moment and kind of pat yourself on the back, because you know that you are a part of making it. You're a part of the upliftment of consciousness that brings you into a new realm of being. So the book, The Pattern, is kind of like two conversations going on at one time. What you experience when you're in the higher realms and what you experience when you're here. The potential, the possibilities of who you are endless. They just continue to grow and expand. So when you sit in your chair and you think, well, I can't do this, I can't do this, and I can't do that, I would like to suggest to you that you can. The limitations of who you are, the constraints of who you are what you believe you can be.
Patterns are all around us. And if we just look where we're sitting, look at the back of the seat, the fabric that is there, that string theory, that quantum field that is literally the patterns that we're sitting on and in front of and behind. Also look at the carpet that we are enjoying being around, that beautiful blossoming of life and experience. I'm just want to say, recognize the patterns that are literally all around us every day, just to remind us who we are. Thank you for your experience.
You're welcome. Thanks for speaking out, because it's true. We exemplify a pattern in our daily life.
I was just wondering if you could describe your healing process, what that looks like and how you go about it.
Well, for me, it's simple. I sit in my meditation chair. I stop thinking about myself. I relax my body. Or if I'm in the case where I've been spending 4 or 5 hours a day in the healing rooms up on the 14th floor or 15th or wherever the heck it is just about stepping out of who you are and making yourself available to the flow of spirit. Because without that flow, the healing is impossible, because you cannot integrate yourself with the basic energy field of the person that you're trying to heal. So immersion into their energy field, though very discomforting and sometimes very strange, is the path to healing. It is through that entry that we heal, truly heal. Not pets on the head say we're going to be okay, an actual healing.
The way that you draw or paint the grid, it looks like it's probably invisible. Like there's no way for us to know. I don't know how to ask this question, but maybe an easy way is to say, do these grid lines exist anywhere that we can experience them physically?
Good question. The answer is yes.
The second question before you do that.
Can I answer the first one?
Yeah, go ahead.
The pattern is visible and livable in higher frequencies of energy expression. You can't look up in the sky and see this stuff. Unfortunately, I wish we could. We have to go to a place where we're sensitized to the higher frequencies of energy, which is spirit.
So, in other words, the vortex in Sedona doesn't have anything to do with this.
No, that's what I saw. First, I saw the galaxy, which I thought was kind of cool because I'd never seen it from that angle before. And as I looked closer, I saw the grid, the pattern. I didn't have a name for it at that point, so I just called it the grid. And that was there, and the closer I got, the more it came out, where I could see different forms and different expressions of consciousness.
The second question is, your
Oh.
paintings are amazing and they open my consciousness to look at them. Is there any way we have access to them, you know, in any way whatsoever, like purchase or?
I'm working on that.
I'm a near-death experiencer, and I know a lot about spiritual work and spiritual life, but it has taken me to an extremely advanced level of spiritual understanding. And having read the book and having met you, I don't think you even begin to understand the depth of what you have released in the world. And I want to thank you.
I'd have to agree with you.
It's phenomenal, and it changes the understanding. We have an understanding at one level, but as soon as I saw that, and then I called you, if I remember rightly, I called you. I left a message.
4 days after you had that experience, I get a phone call from Norma. Who is Norma? I don't know. And someone said, well, Norma is a lady involved with IANDS, and she is a pastor, and she worked in prisons, very experienced, and she saw the pattern. I said, wow, took you 4 days, it took me 40 years. And as you described the pattern, like the little truth meter at the back of my head is saying, yeah, I get it.
So what I want to encourage people who read the book and may, in fact, fall into the pattern is the piece of advice you gave me that day. You say, you're excited about what you have seen, but now I want you to commit to allowing the pattern to bring change. And it has brought phenomenal change. God bless you.
What you experience is precious, and I didn't want you to forget it. I didn't want you to disregard it. And apparently that was an unnecessary conversation because it impacted your life. And you saw everything from a slightly different point of view. So thank you.
I also wanted to say I'm very grateful to Kevin. I read in his book several months ago about how he had healed his brother of a burst vertebrae. Well, my son had a life-threatening mountain biking accident in May. And I mean, he had, you know, his neck vertebrae, his several vertebrae in his back. He had 2 burst vertebrae, a couple broken ribs, all kinds of things that were going on with him. And life-threatening, the doctors and nurses were checking regularly for paralysis. And I remembered reading in Kevin's book about how he healed his brother. So I tried calling him. I left a voicemail and left a text. I even prayed to his guides and God and my guides and said, hey, would you make Kevin aware of my text and voicemail, which they did. And Kevin helped heal my son. And my son had entered the hospital on a Monday night and he was released on Friday. And he was walking 4 miles a day several times. And my son had sent me a photo recently of how he was out paddle boarding. I mean, he did have to wear a neck and a back brace for 12 weeks, but I am so grateful for the healing that Kevin gave. So
Thank you. Just as a sidebar, I wanted to shoot your son. He breaks his back in 2 different places. He breaks his lower back and he breaks the vertebrae in his neck. And he's out walking around almost within 2 days with the little IV trolley because he wasn't going to let anyone help him go to the bathroom.
Hi,
Yes, sir.
Kevin, we have
Hey.
a question from folks online.
Okay.
Curious if there's any research on changes in the nervous system post-NDE.
I will fully admit, I am not a doctor and I don't know about research. What I do know is the effect of a spiritual healing on the nervous system, which is the key to healing your body and reaching out to other people. But as far as a statistical analysis, that's not my specialty.
Question, a personal experience of yours. that you had a dream that impacted your waking life so much that that dream kind of manifests into something physical in this world.
Can you rephrase that a little bit? So it's hard to hear everything.
A personal experience that you had with a dream that you had somewhere, sometime in the past, that was booster for something that you accomplished in this world, waking life. If a dream that impacted you so much that you had to do something about it.
Well, I would say it wasn't a dream. Because dreams are nothing more than a certain particular state of consciousness. There are dreams, there's lucid dreams, there is soul travel. All of these are potential. And my key experience occurred within the realm of soul travel. Because that, I find, is where I'm most effective. Bringing that experience back to here, and it really improves the healing. As we were doing healing for many, many days, energy is the key to the healing process. If you can't imagine it, if you can't recreate it, you cannot heal it, whatever it is.
Over the last several years, I had three, you might call them photographs because they showed up on the gallery page of my phone, but three pictures sent from heaven onto my phone that reveal the reality because they're the same pictures that you showed with your hands as an artist that you showed us today. Those pictures showed up on my phone.
And you know, those guys are always doing things like that. Always. And it's just a knock on the door. Hey man, wake up, wake up, wake up. And you're not getting it. So what do? They send you a picture. And you're still not getting it. So they send you another picture. Three pictures?
Three pictures.
3 times Spirit has knocked on your door and said, hello. And 3 times you have put it aside.
But there's more. The three pictures are the three pictures that you showed. And I think what's also revealing is that there is no time because those pictures showed up before and you're showing them today. And it's also a teaching that everything's happening all at once.
It does. And I'm glad that you're aware of that because it makes you limitless in your potential for expressing who you are.
Thank you.
But please pay attention to the knocks and to the pictures, because I really don't want you to see you go down a path where you have to be slapped around and stuck in a hospital. Take the hint.
Kevin, I know that you love to do soul retrieval work. How does that relate to the pattern?
Well, the pattern is the fundamental frame of consciousness. Don't make it more than that. It's like the guideposts of consciousness. The pattern is not reaching out and grabbing you by the neck and say, wake up, wake up, wake up. No, the pattern is giving you the tools to know yourself. But the soul retrieval is interesting. I started that at a fairly young age, where in going out of my body and being kind of bored with not much to do, I'm ready to go back. I like going, but it does get boring. Is that one of the angelic guides that hang out with me and said, Kevin, there's a soul over there and it's stuck. I said, what are you talking about? Stuck. It can't go into the light. And then the portal opens up very conveniently out there. That one doesn't know they're dead. So please go have a chat. Encourage them to go into the light. So in that case, I probably was not completely straight with that soul. I said, you know, you have relatives waiting in the light, your mom and your dad and your grandparents. Wouldn't you like to be with them? And that particular soul said, yeah, because they were really tired of being stuck in the mud. I said, well, come on. The hand reaches out. You remember the hands were touching each other and there was the glow of light. That is retrieval. It's the touch. It's the connection of spirit to spirit that transcends their feeling and of death. of being dead, and not believing they're dead. I mean, the list goes on about how people get confused when they pass on. But to encourage them to go into the light, because their being there, their guides say to my guides, hey, enough. This guy has re-experienced every little piece of nonsense in his life again and again and again. And in his heart, he wants to go. And the key is he asked for forgiveness. He just didn't know how to go. So my first retrieval was a guy stuck in the mud who didn't particularly want to go, and he got kind of nasty trying to pull me into the mud. But ignore that. Finally, we connected and we went into the light. And that was an education for me. I'd never done that before. I didn't know that you could cooperate with the soul, whether they want to or not, and take them into the light and give them a chance to start again. So I run across many, the thing that makes me anguished are dead children, because they don't know where they are. No one taught them that there's a heaven. No one taught them there's a light, and they don't know where to go. Unless they have a parent retrieving them, or a relative, or an angel that kind of likes them because they've been together before, that child can't go because they don't know how to go. So my personal mission is to look for the children. I figure if an adult is stuck, that's their business. They had an entire life to screw up. They screwed it up. Let them stay there for a while. I want the children out. And also elderly people. Elderly people that don't have guides, that have died from Alzheimer's as an example, dementia. They're confused. So the discussion becomes how to touch them and bring them into the light.